Welcome to the Company of Dads podcast. I'm your host, Paul Sullivan. Today, my guest is Sue Groner, founder of the Parenting Mentor, which coaches parents from birth to teen. She's also the author of Parenting with Joy and Sanity. I'll give it a little sort of shout out right here. Great book. Thin, not too hard to read. And I'm really grateful that she's joined me today. Welcome, Sue, to the Company of Dads podcast.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
How'd you become the Parenting Mentor?
Well, the first way I guess I became one was by being a parent. So
you got a couple decades experience there.
I have a couple of decades. Yeah, my kids are 23 and 25, and I learned a lot along the way. I joke that I wish I had me when my kids were younger.
But you did. You said a different version of you.
Yeah, I did, but I didn't have the Parenting Mentor version. But now I can offer all my wisdom to others. And, the other thing is a lot of people kept asking me questions, asking for advice. What should I do? What do you think about this? I'm having a problem. Yeah. And I would give advice and say, give me feedback. I want to know. And then people started to tell me how good my advice was. And I was better than their therapist. And do you have a
background? Do you have a background in psychology? You went to Wharton, right? Did I make that, or did I make that
did.
Up?
No, I did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess just a lot of interpersonal interactions.
What was the moment though that made you want to take it from, okay, here are my friends and we're talking through things as parents in this together, to, you know what, I want to see if I can help more people. I want to see if I can broaden this out and help people be better parents and presumably, happier human beings. What was a moment where you started to want to blow that out a bit?
There really wasn't a particular moment. It was something that was sort of percolating for a while. And I was doing something else at the time, but I wanted to do this too. And then I realized, this was going to be a full-time gig. Yeah. And so I really started to focus on it. But and sometimes it sounds a little like Miss America when I say, oh, I wanted something where I could help. I want to help people. But
it's only Miss America if you play the piano and toss a baton while telling me that.
Exactly.
So feel free to do that. Yeah. That'd be great viewing.
I can play the piano. I just can't toss a baton. So I guess I'm out of luck. But I did want to do something that felt really worthwhile to me. I do, like you said, I went to Wharton. I have a business background and I love creative problem solving. But when I was able to add in the element of really, of helping other parents not deal with some of the crap that I did.
Yeah.
It felt really good. And it does feel really good now.
What do you think? If you look at, the years of doing this sort of, either top questions you get or top problems you're asked to help solve, what are those? What's 1, 2, and 3 there?
I think it all sort of falls under one category, and that is my kids aren't doing what I want them to do. My kids aren't acting the way I want them to. My kids aren't behaving the way I think they should. And so it becomes, from a very young age till their kids are teens or even adult children, they're not doing what I want them to do. They're not the kind of people I want them to be. There's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of expectation. There's disappointment. And it comes down to sort of like the engineering process. That's what I call it, and parenting's not an engineering project. It's not.
Kids are not bridges. We're not building a new Tappan Zee Bridge with our kids.
Right. And I usually start with that statement. Parenting is not an 18-year engineering project. like everybody else.
It'd be even more expensive than it is. It'd be even more expensive than it already is if we were trying to build a bridge out of our kids.
Right. But when you think about it, we sort of do go to that place. Even in utero, sometimes we'll play music and we'll do all these things to help develop their brains so they'll be the smartest kid.
A serious note, though, because I think of my wife and I are weirdos, so that's not something we would come to you with, because we want our kids to be the best version of themselves so that they can be whatever that is. So I'm going to ask you this question. When parents come to you and say, my child isn't behaving the way I want my child to behave, my child isn't doing what I want to do, is the problem really the parent? Is the problem really the parent's expectation, or the parent not seeing that? I've got 3 kids, they're all girls, but they're completely different human beings. So in that sense, are you working as much with the parent to sort of adjust his or her expectation as you are with working with the kid to bring his or her behavior in line with parental expectations?
I don't work with the child at all.
Yeah.
I only work with the kid, with the parent. But
parent,
yeah, I would say it's more about perspective than expectation. I mean, I guess expectation falls into the perspective category. And so it's really, the perspective comes from understanding why your kid is acting the way they are, and really trying to get to the bottom of that, and also understanding how old they are.
Right.
When our kids are like so good at certain things and seem so mature at certain things, we kind of forget they're still maybe 8 years old, and there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time, and kids actually do evolve and change and develop and become more mature human beings. But, the brain's not fully formed till you're 25 years old.
Sure.
So for an 8-year-old, they've got a long way to go still. And so I think that's really helpful to understand from, starting out, okay, they're only 8. They've been around for only 8 years on this earth. And look how much they've learned already in that short period of time. Now, how do I work with them?
Mm-hmm.
How do I help them and guide them as opposed to dictate to them what I want them to be and how I want them to act and what sports I want them to play, and et cetera, et cetera.
But with that 8-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 16-year-old, is the question, they're not doing what I want them to do, is that revolving around academics? Is it revolving around athletics? Or is it in general, like, decent human being, qualities that parents are concerned about?
All of the above.
Right.
All the above.
I'm talking to you. You're in Westchester County. I'm across the state line in Fairfield County. New York and Connecticut, 2 super affluent, super high achieving parts of the country, where their expectations, on ourselves are as humans are high, and therefore they trickle down to our children. Is that part of, the issues here? Like, as you said, that the expectations of a parent for an 8-year-old are not realistic for what an 8-year-old is likely able to accomplish?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, yes, the more affluent communities tend to push more. They tend to have the resources to be able to do more.
Yeah.
More coaches, more tutors, more activities, more, ability to get my kids from A to B, and then B to C, and then C to D. And, I think we sometimes forget how important it is to just take a breath and let our kids have downtime, have time to just do nothing. It's okay. Let them be bored, for God's sake.
Yeah. You were a huge proponent of bored. Like, I'm bored. I'm like, great, figure something out. You have
okay.
a
So you're
house
bored.
full
Yeah.
of stuff.
I get
There are
bored
books
too.
here. There are Legos here. There are tons of things. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not our job to entertain them.
Right. When you consider an engagement, a coaching engagement with a client to be a true success, what are the things that you kind of look back and say, boy, that worked out really well. I really helped that client, and by extension, the whole family.
Yeah. So my goal always is to help the parent be happier and more relaxed, kind of reduce the everyday stress and anxiety that, inevitably comes from being a parent. Like, I don't care how good your kids are, you're still going to have that. Yeah. And so first thing is, like, at the end of the session, or even during the sessions, I see like a visible change in posture and facial expression. And the clients even say, oh my God, like, I feel so much better. Like, oh my God, you mean like I don't have to worry about that?
Right.
Really? Like, oh, it never occurred to me that I don't need to make a big deal out of this. So that's a little part of it.
Mm-hmm.
The next part comes from the understanding of how we start to communicate with our kids differently. And
What do you mean by that exactly?
so a lot of times we just go to the place of, I tell you what to do and you better do it.
Mm.
And that never works.
Pretty
You
much.
know,
No, it doesn't really work for adults either. Adults also don't like to be told what to
no,
do.
they
And it's
don't.
funny. Yeah.
But with kids, we can be punitive if we choose to. I don't think that ever really works either. I think if you don't do this, I'm taking away your phone. Where's the inner motivation coming from
Yeah.
then?
Yeah.
Where's the kid learning from that? And so, it can be really frustrating for a parent to not get immediate response and immediate change. But I try to help them understand that if this takes a long time, it's okay. It's a
Yeah.
process to make change. It's a process to teach your kids life skills. It's a process to learn time management, for instance. It's a process to have your child learn how to monitor their own screen time. And so rather than being the warden parent, which so many of us tend to be, did you do your homework? Did you do this? Why aren't you doing that? You need to do your chores. Get off your screen. You have 5 more minutes. Get ready for this. Pack your stuff up. Don't forget that. All this warden stuff that sucks as a parent.
Sure.
No one likes that job. We can teach our kids how to become their own wardens. And when we do, all of a sudden, all that angst that we have and the responsibility that we feel we should have over them goes away.
It's such a good point. Their own wardens, or I would think of it as being, resilient. You want to create a resilient system that can operate, without you, because the goal is not in these affluent towns where we live, or should not be, to have this straight march to the success of getting into your dream college.
Exactly.
What happens is you probably will get into your dream college, or if you don't get into your dream college, your plan B is still better than most people's plan A. But if you're not resilient, what are you going to do once you're there? If the greyhound actually catches the rabbit, it screws up the greyhound. And so how do you, help them sort of, advocate for themselves? But also, one of the things my wife and I say is we're parenting you so you become adults. And there's a school that 2 of them went to early on, and the then headmaster said, our goal here is to create the 30-year-olds you're going to want to sit next to on the train. And that resonated so clearly, because anybody who commutes is sat next to the person you don't want to sit next to.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. Well, that's, taking on the responsibilities and taking the nagging and the warden stuff away from the parent is one thing that really helps a parent and also really helps a child. The resilience piece falls on to me under helping our kids to be good problem solvers and helping our kids to develop strong coping mechanisms. And how do we do that? We do that by not fixing all our kids' problems.
Yeah.
And not preventing those problems from happening. You're not going to go out and make them happen. But when they do, it's a good thing. It really is. And if we can say, okay, this problem isn't there for me to fix. This problem is there for my child to have the opportunity to start to learn some problem solving skills, to learn some coping mechanisms. And so, but how do I do that without being totally like, oh my God, my poor kid? We just validate those feelings. How'd they feel? They forgot something important for school. Don't go to the rescue and bring it to them. Let them figure it out. It could be
they
as
go to school
simple
the
as
next day.
they didn't bring their lunch to school, and there are a lot of parents who want to rush that lunch to school. My poor baby's not going to be able to eat. Oh my gosh,
Schools serve lunch. Schools serve lunch.
Exactly.
They might not be the lunch they want, but schools feed them. Yeah.
Schools feed them. And if you think about it, what are the skills that they will learn from not having their lunch that day. They might have to go to the front office, advocate for themselves, and ask for money to borrow money for school lunch that day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Got to pay for it.
Yep.
Number two, maybe they don't and they just mooch off their friends and whatever. They're figuring out what's going to work for them. Number three, they're hungry. And that's also okay. They're not going to die if they're hungry. Like our kids say they're hungry all the time, but they really don't understand what that feels like. So, and even missing lunch, you'd be a little hungry, but we're not like real hungry.
Yeah.
So, like all those things are okay. And then your kid comes home and said, I didn't have my lunch. And you could say, well, I told you 20 times to put it in your backpack and you didn't.
Yep.
But instead, because that's not helpful, we say, oh, yeah, I noticed that you left it. I stuck it in the fridge, so you'll have it for tomorrow. Tell me what you did. I figured when I saw that, I knew you'd be able to figure it out. What'd you do?
Yeah.
How'd you do it? And then they tell you, and they're great. And that's kind of the end of the conversation. And you don't need to say, well, you better remember it tomorrow or blah, blah, blah. They're smart. These kids know.
They're not going to be hungry. They're going to be fake hungry 2 days in a row.
Yeah. So there you go. So it's little things like that. But once you learn to address your kids' feelings instead of your kids' issues, it's a lot easier because you're not fixing anything. You're saying, yeah, okay, I understand. Like if I didn't have my lunch, I probably would have been a little frustrated too. If I don't get invited to a birthday party, or I'm not invited to a party, I'm disappointed. I don't blame you for being disappointed.
Yeah.
And you don't say, but don't worry, honey, we're going to go do something really extra special that day. You know, it's like, you're going to get through it.
Yeah.
You'll get through it. The party will come, the party will go, and you will be fine.
Yeah. It's such a good point. Friend of mine who I did was on an early podcast named Brad Klontz. He's a financial psychologist and does a lot of work around sort of the money scripts that guide us in life. But he gives an example similar to yours in which, a family is on the verge of losing their house. Okay, that is the fact. A child forgot her lunch. A family is on the verge of losing, and there are sort of three outcomes. One, they lose the house. Two, the grandparents come in and save them and pay off their debts and they keep the house. Or three, they find a way to keep the house themselves. So the same, precipitating event in all three, and then three very different outcomes. And his argument, similar to what you've just said here, is that what matters and what resonates with the children is how the family, in this case, the parents, worked out that issue. Similar here, like how the kids, worked out this issue. Because most of the time, I can think of one of my daughters who would forget her lunch, and she'd be very, resilient around it, and that's what you want. She'd figure it out somehow, and the sun would rise the next day. But it would also be a great indication for that poor kid if they couldn't figure out what to do. Then okay, let's talk. Let's try to figure this out again.
Right. And how do you think you might be able to remember your lunch? Do you want to talk about some strategies, and you can try them out and see which one works best for you.
Yeah.
Right. And you let them come up with ideas too. Like you can't always say, well, why didn't you do this? Or maybe you should do that. Or da, 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 da. Like our kids hear that as judgment. We hear that. We say it with love, with loving suggestion. Our kids hear it as judgment. Why didn't you just blah, blah, blah? Honey, you idiot, is what they're hearing, know. I didn't do it right. I didn't just do what my mother made sound so easy, or my dad suggested I do as if it was nothing.
Yeah. I'm curious. We're talking in 2023. It seems like we've come out of the pandemic. We're in what some people are calling the next normal. How has your coaching business, is it different now in 2023 than it was during the pandemic? Are parents seeing things differently, asking different questions, or have they gone back to where they were pre-pandemic?
Kind of back to where they were pre-pandemic. The one thing that's really changed though is that the work I do with companies has definitely grown. that the awareness of the need to support parents has really grown a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good thing.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so, and then you're going in and helping the companies devise programs for
No, I
working
am. I
moms and
give the
dads.
programs.
Okay.
I come in and do the programs.
Yep.
So I'm sort of come in as a consultant in a way. But,
Yep.
we do workshops, I do one-on-ones, I do office hours, things like that. Sometimes it'll be like a big talk that's client facing.
Yep.
So yeah, and that's like a helpful thing. You gotta provide something.
Mm-hmm.
Right now there's the whole quiet quitting thing. There's it gets harder and harder to attract good talent and retain good talent.
Yep.
And little things like this really do make a difference.
That's fantastic to hear, and that's obviously something the company of dads is all behind. I mean, we have to acknowledge that the world of work is different in 2023 than it was in 2019. That the pandemic changed things, and parents, men and women, want to parent differently. But let me ask you this: when you think of the clients that you're working with, what percentage of the people, either in your private practice or the business work, are men who come to you and they're men?
Oh wow! If I had to, like, that are the ones who initiate the contact, a very very little, very small amount. However, when I'm doing workshops with companies, it can be as much as 50-50.
Right.
So
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's? I mean, obviously, the company of dads is all about changing perceptions. We're trying to normalize the idea that a man can be a lead dad, whether he's
right.
working full time, part time, or devoting all his time to his family. Yet, the people reaching out to you are still, primarily moms, at least in your private practice. Is that do you read into that, or is that just kind of the nature of where your practice is set up? What do you think about that?
Well, I think for starting out with like a stay-at-home parent, like a stay-at-home parent who's not working, has a lot of time on their hands to be thinking about their
Right.
child.
Yeah.
And so there's more focus on them, and I think there's sometimes more anxiety. For the working parent, there may be more guilt, there may be more stress dealing with like the morning stuff because they've got to get out to work also and start. And then there's like coming home after a long day and dealing with all the issues that they have to deal with their kids. And so, I mean, the issues are always the same.
Yeah.
They're just present differently, I think.
Yeah.
And when I work with private clients, I encourage, if there's a partner, I encourage both partners to be there and to participate in the session because, you kind of want to be on the same page. It's really helpful.
Yeah.
And usually that happens. Like what you and I spoke about before is that, as much as a mom wants the dad to really participate and be hands-on and take on responsibility, like a lot of the time they're not doing it the way the mom wants them to. And so, it becomes that battle.
Yeah.
But you're not doing it the right way. And so it can be really helpful when we do a session together too, so that there's not one person sort of dictating the way things should be done. And there isn't one proper way, in my opinion. I think both people kind of have to come together and talk about why they feel one way or another. We're all raised in a home, and that's what we learned. That's what we know. And if your partner was raised completely differently than you,
Sure.
then that's even more that can be really challenging, because even if you don't necessarily think it was good, it's still what you knew, and it's sort of where you just sort of automatically go to. So it's learning to have these conversations together and say, well, why do you think this, or why did you feel, what do you think was good, how do you think we should do it? And then it's always, let's give it a try.
Yeah. With the corporate clients, what have you noticed that's different? Because presumably, a company isn't frog marching people into a session with you. Presumably, these people,
No.
they self-select. They want to be there. They want to learn this. And so you said it's roughly a 50-50 breakdown. Again, I know you said the issues are generally the same, but the questions are usually probably different. When they come to you, those men and those women who want your advice as a parenting mentor in the corporate setting, how are they engaging with you that, perhaps was surprising to you or is different from, the work you've been doing largely with stay-at-home moms?
It's not that surprising to me. I mean, that the issues are all still the same, but and that they really care. They want to do this what they consider right.
Yeah.
And I think everyone just wants to enjoy the process more. And which is
That's
what I
great.
love about what I do is so that, how do you deal with sibling rivalry when your kids are fighting all the time?
So
Like
are you telling me, Sue, that nobody becomes a parent because they want to listen to their kids fight? That they want it
isn't
to
that
be
shocking?
crazy. All right. You're the one who went to Wharton. I don't know, whatever. But
shocking. Well, my kids are gonna just love each other, and that'll never happen.
No, it's a great point though. They want to enjoy the process. That's coming from a really positive place. They became parents out of love and joy, and they want to have children. And yeah, you want your kids to be successful, sure, but you want it to be enjoyable. You want it to be loving. You want to be a family, and I mean that's presumably what you're doing.
Yeah, you want to look forward to the snow day instead of dread the snow day. You know what I mean?
I like that. We don't get snow anymore in the Northeast because
no, I know, and I think they don't even give snow days anymore because now they can go online and do it.
But it's a great analogy. No, it's you want to okay, we had this past weekend. We didn't have a better example is probably we went away for a week at Christmas and it was just the five of us and we had a great time. And if you look at what we did, nothing is going to really stand out. Went to the beach, played, walked around, rode our bikes, but the great part of it was we were all together. We played some board games and, was it, the Hollywood version of a family? No, there were times when kids were fighting, kids were tired, people were hungry, but, all in all, it was great. And that to me is, that's the win. That's the ultimate goal.
Right. I think so too. And it's not going to be all the time, but when you get it some of the time, that's great. You got 5 individuals, all different human beings who think differently and act differently. And you got to figure out a way for everyone to get along.
You're right. And it's not going to be great all the time, but it's going to be better if people look up Sue Groner, the parenting mentor. So Sue, thank you so much for being my guest today on the Company Dads podcast. I enjoyed your chat.
Yes, me too. Thanks so much, Paul.